See here. Second. They played last night. They won. No, they played, well, there may be one tonight, but they played last night and they won.
Yeah, but on the trails. It wasn't. I thought it was cool. But I mean, hey, I don't believe something. So and Kurt was out there. He knows how to skate.
All right, let's get started. Hey, Santiago, meet my wife Eleanor.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
So let's look at today. I got a few things I want to go over. We're shifting to modern day maps, but we're gonna skirt that line a little bit. I noticed that some people had looked at the books that I brought, and I'm actually, so in the spirit of like I continually like tweak the course and think about like the best way to do things. I've got a ton of books at home. So I actually if you want to check out these books and take them back to your room with you and hang out with them for a few days, just sign out here. I guess what I would say is if you take it today, bring it back by Thursday so that somebody else can take it until next Tuesday, and then we'll do it again next Tuesday. So help yourself. If you guys like it, I'll bring more books next year. Okay. I wanted to ask Jiwon and I wanted to ask about the project. Hold on a second. I was trying to get high-res images for everything that's in here. Jiwon, would you be okay if I swapped out so this is your image? And I found, and the resolution is like, it's not that great. It's 1,000 by 1,000 and you zoom in on it. It's not that great. And I found this one is a little different design, but it's much clearer. Is that all right if I switch that out? Okay, thank you. And then there was one other one I was going to switch out. Dylan, did you do another map?
Yeah, I thought that because I thought
Cool.
winter study was ending next week, so
you were getting ready.
Yeah, I was confused. It was my.
That's all right. Well, now we got a second one. And then who did the ocean floor? You did. So I found an image that was also higher res.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe that's yours, and this is
That's right.
This is mine.
Oh,
So
wow.
are you okay if I swap it out? Okay. All right, good. Thank you. All right. I hope Raphael's coming because Matthew's sick. Haven't heard from Raphael, but he was gonna present. Let's see. I'm probably gonna keep going. And he can present if he gets here. I want to just go back one more time as we migrate to new maps. I kind of want to just bring this back to you. Like, I would run this through your head, and when you're looking at new maps, because that's the thesis of the course, is that old maps and new maps have a lot in common. And it may be harder when you're looking at a new map that has a lot of analytics and data behind it to ask these questions and sort of be confident, especially if you're not a math person. But my encouragement to you is to do that, to keep pressing on these questions about things. You're going to see some things today. Mapping prejudice is we're actually going to spend some time going deep onto their website before they come to speak. But you really want to understand, like, how did they get the data? Where does it come from? The logic employed in making the map is the projection. The projection and the system of collecting the data are all kind of together, and frankly, so is estimation. Like, um, but who made it? Who paid for it? What audience were they looking for? Or were they addressing? What question are they trying to? All this stuff. Like, it's again back to the rocks. Like, you just got to ask a lot of questions to be a good consumer, and then design. Probably not today, but in one of the next few days, I'm going to talk a little bit more about ways of thinking about the design. Um, I think it has a lot to do with how hard your brain works to understand what the map maker intended. Uh, okay, so I just want you to encourage you to keep that in mind. Okay. Um, so I'm going to talk for a few minutes here about digital humanities. And in one of my learnings this year is, like, instead of trying to show you 30 things in an hour, just show you three things and let you look at them and spend time on them. But I can't help myself, but at least take 5 or 10 minutes and show you 10 things. So that's my compromise. Just so you know that there's stuff out there. Um, uh, and actually, I'm realizing I have to I thought I was going to have two presentations today. Um, I'm thinking about this. So my programmers are here. I'm going to let them in. Um, and I might just tell them to come back next Tuesday because we'll have presentations going next Tuesday. But you can at least meet them. So Amir is in. Hey, Amir.
Hey,
Andre.
Hello. Hey, hey.
Oh, welcome. Sorry, you're in the classroom. Let's see here. There's a little piece of it. Um, Amir and Andre say hello to my class. Um,
Hey.
So these are the guys who help with Pixium and the programming of it. And so we meet pretty regularly, and it's like a constant debugging and upgrading and adding some features, and hopefully, think what you may of Elon Musk, but he is a pretty good programmer, and he's the one who said you should be taking out as much code as you're adding. So we try to take some things out. Um, Andre and Amir, we so our two presenters are no-shows this morning. So
Oh,
um, so I think what I'm going to do is have you come back next Tuesday because I don't know, Dalton, are you presenting next Tuesday?
I am, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think if it's all right with you, I think we're just going to say come back next Tuesday
yeah, yeah, of
and we'll do
course.
it then.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thanks,
I'm
guys.
lucky, man. It is what it
Okay.
is. Okay,
Yeah.
see ya. Bye-bye.
okay. See you later.
Okay. So digital humanities, what does that mean? Okay, well, this is a mouthful. Computation, it's math and technology applied to the humanities. Um, and so anything that kind of looks at the past or even the present, but it uses data and it's humanities, it's not business. Um, And so I wanted to give you some examples of what's out there and happening in the world in this realm. It's really interesting and it's only accelerating. So mapping prejudice, we're going to go into this one in detail. This is what our speaker is about, and we're going to spend some time today going over this. It is a project in the Twin Cities that looks at um, property titles and racial covenants that were actually written into property titles from like 1910 to 1940 or 50. And it's a really sobering thing. Uh, and it's a very robust analytical work that they've done to map these. Okay. So we're going to talk about that in a bit. Molly Burns is a cartographer and a Catholic, and she approached the Catholic Church. This is probably now 10 years ago, and said, "Do you guys know everything that you have?" And she proposed to them to build a GIS system of the Catholic Church's properties. And it became hugely valuable to the church. They didn't know. They didn't have an inventory of everything that they own, and it's massive. Um, and there's a great New Yorker article about this.
Is it accessible online? Do you know?
I don't think it is. The article from the New Yorker is accessible.
Okay.
And if you ask an AI tool to summarize the article, like you can get a
Yeah.
quick read of it. But I don't think the actual tool is available.
They go back.
I'm pretty good at like finding speakers and like cold calling them. And I tried and tried to get her to come to this class and never succeeded. Maybe someday. Um, and in that spirit, I put a post out to LinkedIn where I asked the people that I knew who were doing digital humanities to tell me if they found anything interesting out there. And somebody just today responded with this, which is a network model of the Roman world. It's called Orbis. And
Just today?
just today, Mary Hosfeld. Yeah, yeah. So it's a map. And given that we did the Putnjeriana map, maybe we'll do a vote here on what we're going to go deep on this morning. But it seemed like an interesting one. Look, 3D imaging of objects is happening. I know something about this because I shoot mostly two-dimensional. I waded into three-dimensional objects for a while. It takes like 100 times as many images to do it, but it's being done. And I think this thing is actually pretty small, but and not only that, I'm pretty sure you can zoom in on this thing. I'm not going to do it, but that took a lot of work to do that. This guy, Graham Sykes, he's like a stonemason who's gotten into digitizing churches and objects on churches. Let me see if we can get this. I can show you this real quickly. So he did this with some drone technology and he built this model. So this one guy did it all by himself. Check this. This is crazy.
Or the detail on the imaging.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Isn't that wild?
So he modeled this, so
Yeah.
there's no scanning.
No, he did. I'm pretty sure he used a drone and developed a three-dimensional model of the building. So it's in a software. Yeah. Yeah.
Like the definition of it is crazy, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so that's another one.
You know how many cooks?
I don't.
Because this looks like the drone was like pouring over every little time.
Yeah.
Is this just a passion project?
For him? No, he's employed to do this for cultural. He was, but then he got, and kind of just like the guy in New York that we saw, Ian Rasmussen, who does maps for developers. He used to be a lawyer for developers and then started making maps for them and turned that into a business for himself. All right. Okay. I'm going to keep going in the highlight reel. There's some interesting sobering maps of the Holocaust and using technology to find mass killing sites. There's an eviction project that's here. These guys digitize cultural objects like maps and tapestries and their work is really super high class. SciArc is a nonprofit, and this is the CEO. I'll show you one of these. Again, it's kind of like the Smithsonian's image. It's a form of mapping. So they have applications. There's like 30 of these on their website. And so you can take a tour of something online.
Guiding me through this experience will be Christine McAllister, a seasoned park archaeologist.
I find this okay. I really want to just zoom in on what I want to zoom in on, but this is their guided tour. All right, enough of that.
Stone.
So Matterport is a company that is at least 10 years old, and it's like a $5,000 system where you can buy a camera and take a series of pictures inside of a room and then build out something like this. So this is a library in Miami. It's all about maps. And so you can look at it from the floor plan sort of up above, or you can go into the space and then you can kind of walk around. And it's pretty cool. Let me see if I can find there's a map that Chet Van Duzer and I have worked on together. I think it's here.
Oh, wait, so can you also navigate not just on the,
On the dots,
oh, wait, it looks like.
I think you go to the dots.
Yeah,
Look, it's nice to experience it. I find like for our kind of things, like you can't get the detail that that we like so much on a map. But this is Walt C. Miller, the guy who did the 1507 map. This is a 1516 map.
oh, it's multiple.
Like it would work better for like any other type of gallery.
You mean like a traditional art gallery?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Matterport. Um, he was a speaker last year, and he's done a number of um, London-based digital humanities things. They mapped the Old Bailey. Anybody familiar with the Old Bailey in London? It's like their court system, and so they have proceedings from the like 18th and 19th centuries, and they're mapping out where all the criminals used to live. Yeah.
Where the criminals used to live or where the crime was high? Actually, that's
You're probably right. I don't know if it was where they lived or it probably was where the crime was committed. Um, okay, so I think that's the overview. So now we got a good amount of time. Um, so I think I want to we might as well start with mapping prejudice. We're going to go there, and then I've got and then we can do the Stanford Orbis thing if that looked interesting. The other thing that I was thinking we could do here, I put this into our playground. So there's a couple of this guy named Booth did a map of poverty in London. So I thought we could look at that. And then there's also a San Francisco map, and I'm not going to tell you what it's about. I'm going to let you guys look at it. So I think our agenda here is I think we're going to go do mapping prejudice first, and then we'll do the Stanford thing because it's a follow-up on our Putin-Geriana map, and then we'll do these two maps. Okay, so I want you to get out your computers and we're going to do the same thing. I want you to take at least 5 minutes and I want you to look at um, the Mapping Prejudice website. So if you Google Mapping Prejudice, you should come up to this. And so I want you to explore the website, in particular, the map here. And it's a time lapse. And then, but I want you to also to zoom in and look at some of the covenants. So why don't you guys take at least 5 minutes and look at it by yourself, and then we'll partner up and talk about it. Everybody find it? So type in just Google mapping prejudice. Yeah. Everybody found it? Okay. You guys, once more time, you want to? All right, why don't you guys circle up with someone next to you and just chat about what you're seeing in there. Did you look at the data? Um, did you look at the map? Did you see, I would share what you saw, what your questions are, and then we'll circle up as a group.
Because I was. I think it's kind of, yes, but I'm just looking at the map, I was kind I always been very interesting that. You can see that they make a very distinct around. Just that. Basically.
Yes. There's only starting with. There you go. So then all of a sudden, the green gas, the first. I was like, oh, yeah, you had a lot of like modern. It seemed like there was like huge divergence, but I just looked at it. I didn't know those one, but you don't have, like I expected to get right to.
White, case, yeah, that might be it. That might be it.
Yeah, but I love that.
And like I was reading that it looks like real estate development allowing greater synthetic government enables creation like in kind of suburban neighborhoods, like urban areas all around it. And they're like, oh look, you probably saw what we kind of like framed it the way that it seems that it's more like a collaborative.
So. I'm getting water to the boss.
Do you know, are not labeled, do you reckon these areas are green spaces like parks? Yeah. Oh no, it's still like areas. Okay.
That's crazy. But.
Oh, like they're all bodies of water, right? Yeah, it's all bodies. This is.
It could be like.
It's all physical.
Now, they all know. Yeah. Because I don't think it's a part of the area. I think the overlay data is really. Yeah. That's very disappointing. That's what was just like the first there because everything's very exposed. That's why. Oh wait, so it's needed them. The synchronous lights. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like laid very nearby, all the visual content areas. It seems like in Minneapolis, so.
Yes, we're not.
They're-
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like a map.
Yeah.
Is it a sheet or like? Where's it? I guess maybe not. Like my mom was my street. I just thought it was.
I do wonder about that's like a good observation. The fact that there are fewer, it might just be that.
I mean, there's also.
Yes, right.
But this is the right area. Now, justice now. So all these other things is so high. People because the children are closer to the area. And it's so.
2 6 months there.
But there's a lot of things.
Oh, but these must all be houses. Wow. Unless maybe it just left. It was inside the silhouette. It's not very dense. Dense though.
Starting to find somewhere.
Yeah.
There's another one I think so. I mean, they all look metal plastic.
If you fascinated, they like paired this map with like
That's just like the first one.
overlay.
It's not that inside. Yeah. And that's not the.
And I was reading, they said that like there's an average disparity between more or less
Inside of the
houses of about 14.
But year and year.
Between
here in northern.
racial covenants versus.
Those stores would have been.
So like having like almost like a price topography
They've been
would be, I think would
like mostly black.
offer like way more.
This that's kind of.
Be-
The city seems like, yeah. You can go, my house is right here. Oh, hey, yeah. Wait, is that the this one? It's like how I know it's like nice. One called Justice Man.
And you can click on the early photographs and you can see it.
Which is this? Did you go back?
Oh, and it has a specific clause as well. And no personal.
All right, let's circle up here. So, so Josh, given that you're from Minnesota, what are your thoughts and questions about this?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this map before, but I feel like it's interesting if you like zoom out a little bit. It's kind of like we're talking about. It's kind of like our room, kind of like our first like suburbs,
Uh-huh.
not in like downtown the city,
Yeah,
and not as much. A little bit in the like outer suburbs, but it's more concentrated in that room.
yeah.
Interesting.
Other thoughts or impressions from this? Yeah.
Dalton and I were talking about how we think this would be a much more useful tool if you could overlay other maps to show differences between them.
Other maps like
If you were to look at where different groups are living today in Minneapolis.
you mean like it by ethnicity or race?
Ethnicity or race.
Or
to see
income?
how, yeah. See
Uh-huh.
how it made an impact.
Yeah,
Pretty valued photography would be very interesting as well to overlay.
yeah,
There's a very, sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, talking about the ring thing, there's this like the idea of like the periphery is interesting because it's like I asked IGBT, it's basically like these are all middle class neighborhoods, new middle class neighborhoods, which needed racial covenants to kind of sell to middle class people, like these won't become lower class now.
Right.
That's why they're kind of at the edge of the expansion, industrial expansion.
So you knew about this. You
Yeah.
knew that this was a thing. How had you learned about this?
Okay, we looked at. I think it might have been this exact map
In high school?
like history class.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
There's an interesting feature if you click on the see all covenants mode.
yep,
You can compare actually the specific clauses in the deeds based on each house. So if you zoom in and just click on one of the houses,
yep,
and you can compare how the covenants actually changed over time. So in like the earliest ones from like 1910, they like have like a list of specific races, individuals of whom are like debarred from occupying.
How do you do that? How do I?
So if you click, you see covenant right there. It says covenant, and it gives you the exact text in the deed. It says
Yeah.
fourth.
Yeah,
Well, you could just read if you scroll back up. It says fourth that grantee cannot sell or lease said real estate to a colored person. Like you
Yeah.
have the exact clause.
Yeah.
You can compare that between properties because they differ.
oh yeah,
The older ones differ substantially from those that were issued more recently. And I think that's also like a very helpful tool that the map offers.
how can you compare, like, there's some technology to
So you
compare?
know how the time lapse tells you the
Yeah,
year in
yeah.
which the covenant was established? You can see the earliest one. You can zoom in on the earliest covenants established.
Oh,
And then you can switch over to the other map mode and click on those properties. So in the earliest ones, like from 1910s, it will say specifically at any time you conveyed mortgage or lease
I see.
persons of, and then it has like a litany. As opposed to the abridged
uh-huh,
clauses of the later contracts, which like it kind of like it like almost institutionalizes like a sort of existing or established view of race without like seeing need of further specification in the documents, which is kind of I don't know.
yeah. Other questions or comments, observations that you had from looking at this? Yeah,
Really what I was just like kind of looking at the entire time was like that kind of difference between like urban center of like the two cities that are on the map, Minneapolis and Milwaukee. And kind of how the suburban sprawl and how it's these racial communities are present in the sprawl. But what I was doing is I was kind of comparing what I saw in Minneapolis to Milwaukee. Because in Minneapolis, I kind of look at like where the city boundaries are.
Yeah.
And there are many parts of these that like of this map that are like in the boundaries of the city of Minneapolis. They're just like newer developments in the city of Minneapolis.
Right.
But if you go over to Milwaukee, like it's like I think it's even more stark in Milwaukee that it's like basically the city limits are like basically no covenants, and then outside a ton of covenants, and I was just wondering about why. So I was looking into it, and I don't know if this is the reason, but basically uninterrupted from 1912 to 1960, Milwaukee had a mayor from the Socialist Party of America. So that might be something that like there was the city government was just maybe not willing to go through with racial covenants, but the suburbs around it maybe were. So I don't know, that was just something interesting I found about Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Do you know like what the process looks like for cities to annex surrounding territory, like into like, I wonder how that works actually.
Yeah.
I think it's probably different from state by state, but
Okay.
it usually requires like, I think sometimes the involvement of the legislature and or like, votes of the people, I think.
In like the regions that are to be annexed.
I guess.
So I imagine that maybe the individuals living in the racially covenanted houses maybe wouldn't consented to the annexation.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah.
Dalton and I were also looking at the time lapse to try and figure out when a lot of these
Yeah.
movements happened.
Yep.
For Milwaukee, it's a lot in the early to late 20s.
Uh-huh.
And then the other like big boom is kind of like early to late 40s. And
Post-war.
We were wondering how like World Wars may have impacted that, or more migration north during those times.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
I was just thinking how this affected the Black population, like if they live around the Green Region right now in Minneapolis.
If they what?
If they live around the Green Ring in Minneapolis.
Okay, so do you want to comment on the racial geography of the Twin Cities?
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know exactly what to say, but like it's pretty stark to be honest. Like in a lot of areas, like um oh I don't know how to completely point to it, but like northern Minneapolis, like where like Minneapolis is like printed north of that is like generally predominantly black neighborhood, I'd say.
Yeah.
And then also South Minneapolis. So at least kind of the areas where there are no covenants. And then like the suburbs tend to be pretty white. Or it's like I don't know, it's pretty stark. So I think you can definitely see the effects.
Where was George Floyd's situation?
South Minneapolis, I think,
Oh,
wasn't
yeah,
it? Like
something,
somewhere around here.
But
Yeah.
I totally forgot I was in Minneapolis.
Does this does it happen in Georgia or other countries?
Like, what the
Are you aware that something like this happened in the history of your country?
maybe right now, because a lot of people are immigrating to Georgia right now, and not everyone wants to rent their house to like an immigrant, especially if they're from, for example, from India, let's say.
Yeah,
It's a lot
yeah.
of people are immigrating right
Yeah.
now. I would say China doesn't have this for sure. Because probably everyone is about the same race.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, for some cities, we have some policy towards like people from rural areas, but I don't think we just take the
Yeah.
because I mean, everybody should be visible. It's just the promise of urbanization. There are some local families, and there are a lot of people whose parents are not from Shanghai, but they just work and they try to set that relation from. But yeah, I don't think there's separation between.
Yeah.
You know what year these guns were outlawed?
Fair Housing Act, I don't know when that was passed, but
60s? think it was the
I
sixties.
mean, this map ends when it's always 65.
Yeah,
68, I think, is when the Fair Housing Act is passed, and I think that's when the racial covenants were added.
I'm not totally sure, like, obviously it's illegal now, but some of them are still like written in. I had a
are
friend
still
who-
what?
They're still written in.
They're
Some of them-
written in. They are absolutely
Yeah.
written in.
Yeah,
Like,
but
it's
they
hard
haven't
to,
been removed.
it's hard to get them
Yeah.
off of a title. They're just not enforceable.
I had a friend whose mom was like a lawyer and working on that, so
Uh-huh.
such a like long process because of how
Yeah,
like extensive they were.
yeah. Okay. I think I'm gonna move on, if that's all right. Now, given that, that we're headed, I think I'm gonna postpone the map of Rome, and I'm gonna go to the booth map now, which is in the playground. But I want to mix things up a little bit, guys, because we've all been sitting next to the same group of people here. So I'm gonna take every other person here, and I want you to move 6 seats in that direction. So Michael, Noah, Josh, Michael, Raphael, Dylan, Felicia. So move 6 seats over. So Michael goes to 2, 4 to Michael. Michael goes to Michael. Okay? In that direction. I want to give you guys a chance to talk with somebody else that you haven't talked to before. You here? Okay. All right. So now what I want you guys to do is we're gonna stare at, actually, you know what? We'll do this all at once. 6. I don't know what 6 is.
you see
2,
there?
I think you're,
Yeah.
you're further over. Okay. So I want you guys to go to the playground exhibit and 776. And I want you to look at, so do you have a computer?
Oh, yeah, you're good.
Uh,
I'm trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, so that's fine. So I want you to look at the booth. There's 2 booth maps and there's a San Francisco map. And so I'd like you to take a good 5 minutes and look at both of those maps, or all 3 of them, but the booths, there's 2 booths. And so just look at them, soak them in, understand what's, as best you can, what's going on. Use your AI tool to research it. And then we'll talk with our partners about what we've got here. Yes, yes. What? You should have bought it. Let's see if we do it today. No. Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it under a different name?
It's the last 3 maps in the 776. So yes, it's San Francisco Chinatown.
Yes, can I?
Yep.
Prepared under the supervision of the many of the board of supervisors.
Kind of funny. Well-to-do professional class is large. Like
You're roughing, yeah.
good and ordinary. I wonder what this means.
Chinese gambling. Does it say Chinese?
Need gambling? Is that what it says?
It's just recruit training, general training, fancy, Chinese gambling, Chinese prostitution.
Yeah, make sure you use a tool to understand, like, who made this map and why was it made, or for what audience.
I know.
It's Jocelyn. It's something.
It's 21 with some moderate possibility of any store in the second row. Maybe it was standard. Vicious semi-criminal. That's quite the description.
Well, that's not the same question.
Yellow. Do you notice a notable pattern?
This is like from the river going.
Oh, I guess in North London.
The other one is just around a little piece and.
It's just the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like a little bit of it.
I was wondering if there's like a.
Oh.
Oh, I see.
I'm looking at
So this one doesn't even have the option.
So
the yellow.
this is the poverty map. And
And
you were looking at the map of San Francisco.
Oh, there was one.
Yeah. Chinatown.
Oh.
That entire
Map. Kind
the red is
I'd love to go back.
they're all joss houses
in my
Did you?
and they're basically like Buddhist.
Or are they like centers?
And they live over here. And it's beautiful.
They're against all the
consistent. This is mostly shops and government buildings. So I don't think a lot of people actually live there. This is where they.
This is they're called like God houses.
There's no God houses? Is that what like your shops on is like God? Gods?
Yes, and then it's down clear.
Yeah.
Like, how much information. Or they built.
I thought because there was a lot of
Also, the West India Dock Road is like. I wonder what this area is.
Oh.
Makes sense.
What so they just went around and they just like surveyed like what the
It's also weird, it seems like, it's just been, red, but.
there is a very high density of.
People live on the video road. Like,
this is really
It's really easy.
Restaurants.
There's some restaurant, all factory. He's also colors website.
I don't
I don't care about the teacher. Oh yeah.
Bigger map has.
Yeah, I think so.
What about the buildings are subdivided? Dental school and Ganley. Taylor and Ganley. And Ganley. Not that it would be flash.
I guess. It's like right around. And then some down there.
There's just each like prostitution.
Oh, it's so interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of.
That's in the middle of gambling.
Oh.
And it's also
Different.
I thought you were Brisbane. It's very good.
Yeah, this is
In the middle of gambling.
It's also interesting.
It's like
One in the Guardian,
get something out.
It's also interesting. Population differences.
Yeah, but don't like what you don't there's a Chinese
yeah.
Why put it but if that was your crap, I think you yeah. Also, we're out steady about it wasn't here. There's not a fire like if you were like if you like Facebook, you also that's what you
Oh,
is that nothing?
That's I do think it's kind of funny that just know it like it's not.
I think it's maybe. I knew someone looked at first, but
No,
it's like.
Wait, where's?
What is it?
I was reading like the. When I looked at the image text, it alleged somewhere it says on the map. From the, oh, this is in the report, not necessarily on the map. So on the report, it says the Chinese center with them successfully. I'm also sure. It's this kind of stuff. That's fascinating to me, like they say that. And he's following happens, but then I'm looking at like the label.
Oh, no, definitely, because I think it's something like that.
I mean, it's really close.
I was thinking of automation. The railroad lines go through here and it disappears. They come back up.
Oh,
Sidewalk there, Lucian or Southern Station.
I think they just saw like many restaurants will like the hot dog that was that it's just I do not know yet, but it's the estimate.
Well, I don't think they thought it was bestiality. Like when they say, I think they said bestial practice. And I think. Oh wait, no, it says habits of bestiality. Well, habits of bestiality.
Oh,
It could just mean like, no, that could just mean like, it could be like that's the name. I don't know, actually, like Chinese.
Except for like Maine.
I'll say it's early.
I think it's more so they're focusing on the prostitution.
Oh, yeah.
This is resident. And quote unquote. They want to associate activities with the Chinese community in San Francisco.
Big bet.
And they're using it as a pretext to support them all.
I don't know anything about London.
Big brand.
Be done by West.
I guess they more like
That's.
prostitution is probably legal.
Oh.
I'm sure it probably still is in many states. But like, so I think you're basically saying like it's criminal activity and like we should.
It was like how much.
I don't think about that.
This is major.
Right off of Whitehall.
I don't know why.
Whitehall.
No, I said I could make these guys do. Understandable.
Yeah, because there's quite a data on the city itself there.
Whitehall.
Yeah, there's Trafalgar Square.
Most of the open.
I've already used it.
Yes, we have the home, so they labeled all the films, go to the India office.
Why are they so much in the kitchens?
It's funny. There was more like white sleeves just and this like
Fight stick.
there's a lot of
I think that's a British thing. So let's see the ways that they have to do
oh yeah, so
Well, I think it's quite common in all decisions for sailors, like.
What actually use? It should bring it.
I think they should bring it back. Some of those.
Well, I don't know why I think it was such a simple thing. Why it was so tough. Maybe if there's a war, they would like just cut to the chase and be like. Maybe the guys don't get like.
All right, let's circle up. So the booth map, who looked into who made it and why they made it? Anybody look into that? The booth map, the London one.
We saw that the data was from school board visitors, which we thought was interesting, the East End map.
Uh-huh. Did anybody ask like why it was made in the first place? Like what the purpose was? And if nobody did, can somebody go do that right now?
I'll do it right now.
Okay, what were you struck by regarding that map, or what questions did you have about it? Yeah.
If you look at some of like the larger parks, like the park by the Serpentine and Basin, which is called Hyde Park.
Yep.
You see that like around it, there's no blue, so it's just kind of covered or like surrounded by wealthy and
Yep.
middle class people.
Yep.
Versus like there's just regions of like downtown, I don't know what you'd call that necessarily, but where there's like a lot more blue, kind of not on the main street, kind of the alleyways.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael.
We were saying we were surprised that on a lot of the main arteries, you have a lot of red, so well-to-do middle class, and then immediately off the arteries, it would be blue or black.
Yeah.
We were saying that today it's pretty switched. Most people don't want to live on a main road, and also you don't see a lot of diversity in terms of earnings so consolidated together. Like most of the time, at least in the US now, it's clusters that are all homogenous in terms of income.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
We were wondering why the city of London itself didn't really.
Yeah. Yeah, good question.
All the cities, right?
Yeah.
The AI tool is really interesting about the poverty map. Apparently, someone named Charles Booth wanted to prove that London didn't actually have 25% of its people living in poverty, but when he made the map, he charted that it was 31%.
Interesting. Yeah.
The other interesting thing is he entirely self-funded it.
Wow. Who was he? Like, did he say he had money?
It says a wealthy Victorian businessman and social reformer.
And social reformer. And what year was this made? 1889.
The East map is 87.
Uh-huh.
So it's interesting. Maybe he saw it in 87 and was like, oh no, I can still prove my point, and then expanded it out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's a ship owner and a corn merchant who inherited a lot of money.
Interesting. Other observations about it? We saw this map for sale in London like 15 years ago. How much was it? 10,000? It was a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
The second one or the first one?
It's a sheet, like I think the second one has like there's 8 maps that go together or something like
There's
that.
multiple sheets. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
You're right,
Yeah.
it's appreciated since then.
Yeah. Yeah.
We should have bought it.
It's a pretty seminal map in the world of data visualization. Like actually I'll go over a few of those tomorrow or the next day. There's others that are quite famous.
What does the yellow indicate on the second?
Oh, upper class.
Upper class, okay.
They didn't have yellow on the first
Yeah, there was
another
yellow,
one.
yeah. I was just looking because I saw on Santiago's screen, there's like a little square called Governor Square that's like completely surrounded more or less by upper class.
The yellow is pretty much outside the main roads.
Cambridge Square
Yeah.
and Oxford Square.
And remind me, how did he estimate the data here? Like, how did he get the data? Did he school something
Yeah,
or other?
The top says compiled from school board visitors reports.
Oh, yeah, here it looks
So it
like.
could be like how they found the schools based on.
So do we like so he's got some school reporting, school funding document?
The other interesting thing, the like black dashed lines is just a guess, but those could be like districts for schooling in the East End map.
Oh, the other map. All right, hold on. Oh, these ones. You think those are school districts of some sort? Can you ask the AI tool how Booth got the data for this map? Like I'm pressing on, like we look at it, seems like it's pretty good, but like how do we really know? And I'm guessing that
The hybrid fieldwork operation.
that's what it says, that how he got the data.
Knocking on people's doors. How many?
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Are you well to do? Yeah, yeah.
He taught to school world, which did not have first-hand knowledge of what happened. They were the people who would ask how does my kid went to school. So they
would see that.
But what if a family didn't have kids?
That's a good question. But he also did that, like knocking on doors himself.
Uh-huh.
Actually, it wasn't just.
Yeah.
School
School district? Yeah, yeah, Sarah.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, but like at the time, London was not like a single political authority. And I looked at the 1900s when they established various boroughs of London.
They didn't exist at this time.
And so they did it, but in the borough council, like the council authorities, were established to replace vestry and school board districts. So these, and I noticed on here that you have like kind of the lettering on top of these
Yeah,
areas have the names that they also mention in the legend. So like the one has called Whitechapel, and there's one Gentle Greens. And those later became boroughs. So I'm assuming.
where is that? Is that on this map or the other?
Yeah, it's on that. It's very faint.
Faint?
So if you go onto like the Whitechapel Road,
Yep,
which is you can kind of see that. You see that C in the middle of if you go down a little.
yeah.
You see that C in the middle of like a building.
Just above the Whitechapel.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so like you can kind of see that that's saying Whitechapel.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
If you
yeah.
go up into the borough or the area above, you can kind of make a mental clean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So. And,
Does anybody know about housing in London, like low-income housing in London? I have, so somebody who lives there told me that the low-income housing, unlike in many US cities where it's concentrated in particular parts of the city, like there are requirements in London for every borough to have a certain, there's 33 boroughs and so it's more distributed. I wonder if that had anything to do with
also because
this.
housing and all that is responsibilities that are done by the boroughs. They
Yeah.
they don't have as much like a central city government as like a city of New York does.
Yeah.
It probably leads to better outcomes, yes, from what the economic papers have read.
That was what the person who lived there said. Let's shift gears. I think we're gonna have to do you tomorrow for your presentation. Let's talk about San Francisco. Who made this map and why did they make it? And if you,
It seems like there's a board of supervisors
Yeah.
established in the city of San Francisco in the wake of xenophobic sentiments that were sort of exacerbated by Chinese laborers being expelled from other states. And so it seems like there was some motivation to try to come up with some justification for like an expulsion act or something. Like,
expulsion of the
of
Chinese
yeah, it's
from
like-
where?
From San Francisco.
Okay.
That's what at least this is what I gathered from the image text, but maybe I'm
Anybody else look at that? Can somebody ask their AI tool who made this and why did they make it? What's a Joss house?
a temple.
It's like
A temple? Yeah.
it means the house of God. It kind of surprised me.
A Joss house?
Buddhist.
Yeah. What else did you notice in here?
I was wondering why there was a white prostitution part. Why did this? And I genuinely think it was like a to show like that are like white women in danger of like entering opium den, gambling or whatever, like mixing up the
Anybody else have a thought about that? So it's CP and WP, and they're in different parts of Chinatown, right?
Well, you've mentioned that sailors, because wait, I might be wrong. Sailors were frequently come to San Francisco. I'm imagining that white sailors specifically, were probably.
yeah, white sailors for the only people going to the opium den. It's the only white people going to the opium den, basically.
Anybody find out why this thing was made?
It's made by a special committee of the board of supervisors, but I didn't find why.
I see something that is part of, yeah, obviously an effort to promote anti-Chinese like sentiment, but
Yeah.
people want to like, or the government wants to relocate a lot of the Chinese population to like a segregated district. I don't really, I can show them. No.
So that's it. people other than the Chinese in San Francisco were worried about the immigration, and so they had this map made to uh, essentially keep the Chinese in Chinatown and not move elsewhere outside of Chinatown. Um, there was huge anti-immigration. Um, uh, Let me show you. We have another exhibit on Pixium about anti-Chinese. There's another map I want to show you real quickly here.
Isn't it almost kind of I don't wanna say zoning, is it almost kind of just page map in to a degree,
Yeah,
like, the sense of like, saying we are designating these areas as these things and
I say more propaganda
more propaganda,
than zoning.
yeah.
I think it's trying to like increase the motivation to enforce ordinances that like kind of mandate a sort of racial segregation, right? Is that kind of like the idea?
Well, I'm pretty sure that like Chinatown was a ghetto.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so Chinese were not allowed to live
Yeah, yeah.
outside of
Elsewhere,
China.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that map was made, I think, in 1880s. And this one, if it will load for me, was made in 1872. This is a whole collection of San Francisco maps that I've accumulated. And check out this poem. They are coming every week 1,000 more from the crowded towns of Asia and the great Mongolian shore. They leave their homes and fatherland with all that make them dear, for better pay and better fare that wait the toilers here. And then it's really kind of amazing. They are traveling up our valleys singly and in dusky files, in stages, cars, and even on foot, the long and dusty miles. They are bringing plague and pestilence in fever-laden ships and taking gold and silver back on their returning trips. To ply their trade of they are bringing hordes of prostitutes to ply their trade of shame. So this is the same milieu. Pretty unfortunate. And for me, it's always been incredibly surprising to see this. All right, I need to wrap up because our guests, we got 7 people in the waiting area. By the way, I'm sponsoring a table for trivia on Thursday. So if you have an interest, see me or email me afterwards.
Wait, what do you mean by sponsoring?
Like I'm buying the food. Yeah. Yeah.
Like we did last.
We had an all-star team from the map, like last 3 years, and they all came, and on the first night we won.
You won?
We won, yeah.
You weren't there last.
I was not last week. You were second, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see. Let's see if we can do better.
Better.
I might have a basketball game, but if I don't, that sounds awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let me know, and yeah, I'd love to. It's fun. Okay. Need to let our guests in.
Yeah, at least once. I don't think Sigma let that army. Hey,
Hey Tom.
Michael, how are you?
Well, you want the real answer or the fake answer? I'm supposed to say I'm great. The truth is, as you can imagine, things are not great at all in the Twin Cities right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
yeah.
We just for framing here, and we've got some people who've joined. I'm going to introduce everybody. Give me a second. I will introduce all the visitors that we have online. Michael, you should be able to see in the room here. We've got all our students are here. Give me just a second. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, so we just got through looking at we looked at your website, Michael. We also looked at the booth map. of London from 1889. And then we also looked at the San Francisco map of Chinatown. PJ probably knows this map from late 1800s about all the vices going on in Chinatown.
Hmm.
Okay, so we are delighted to have Michael Corey with us. Here he is. Um, so Michael is the geospatial technical and data lead for Mapping Prejudice. Michael spent 20 years as a journalist at various organizations, and we are delighted to have him here. Let me introduce also Michael to you and the students, the group of people that we have here. PJ Mode is here, I believe from New York, right, PJ? He's in New York and a prolific collector of persuasive maps from where his collection now resides at Cornell. We also have Gordon McPherson, a business school classmate of mine. And then two people I don't know, Lainey Sporbert and Kate Richardson. I don't know if you can turn your camera on for a second and say hi.
Hi there.
Hello.
I'm Lainey, and I work here at Williams. And I signed on because I just finished reading The Sum of Us around racism and classism, and I just started The Color of Law around redlining. So I thought I would pop in and see what you had to say. Thanks for the
Awesome.
invite.
Thank you. Thank you. And Kate, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, I'm Kate. I work in academic technology here, so I saw Tom's advertisement for your presentation. It caught my eye.
Great. Thank you for joining. All right. Well, Michael, I'm going to pass it off to you. We've got 40 minutes total. So if you want to talk for 25 or so and leave 15 for questions, something like that.
Yeah, see what I can do on that. That's the plan.
Awesome. And are you okay if we ask questions along the way?
I would rather save them to the end. So I
Okay.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and share. Okay, you should see a big Mapping Prejudice logo.
Yep.
Okay. Well, hi everybody. As Tom mentioned, I'm the technical lead at the Mapping Prejudice project at the University of Minnesota Libraries. And we are an interdisciplinary project that is part history project, part data project, part community engagement project. And we are most known for our mapping of racial covenants, which I'll talk about just in just a second. But we also use the opportunities where we get to talk to people about helping them understand the ways in which racial covenants are part of a larger history of segregation and denial of opportunities to people, because racial covenants are certainly not the only game in town. And so I'll just briefly start by like, what is a covenant generally? Like a covenant generally is a provision in a property sale that limits the buyer's use of a property in some way. So it's a restriction on that person's property rights. And a covenant often, quote, runs with the land, meaning that it's a provision that is binding on future buyers of the property as well as the current owners. So if I buy a house that has a covenant on it, and then I sell the house, unless there's like often there will be provisions in there that say this covenant runs with the land. And so that restriction that may have been put in 20, 30, 40 years ago may still be binding on me today. And not all covenants are racial covenants. The general term for covenants in property law is restrictive covenants, and people sometimes use restrictive covenants and racial covenants interchangeably, but that's not correct. All covenants are restrictive covenants, and there are many types of restrictive covenants that are still perfectly legal. Racial covenants are illegal, but other types of restrictive covenants, like how far back from the property line does the building need to be, how big does the house have to be, what materials does the house have to be made of, what uses are permitted, and just because they don't have explicitly racial language, it does not mean they don't have a discriminatory impact, but there are a lot of covenants still in property law today. And just a quick warning that we're going to be seeing some examples of racial covenants now, and so it may not be surprising, but there's going to be racist and outdated language in these next slides, and I'm going to be reading the text of some of these covenants out loud. And so just fair warning that that's coming, and from my perspective, like, there are just days where you're not up for that, and I totally understand that if that is the case. And so if you need to zone out for a second when some of this is happening, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. But that's coming up next. So racial covenants are embedded in lots of different types of property records, most often in deeds, but lots of other types of property records. This is the earliest example that we have from Minnesota so far. This is from 1910, and it is from a small house on 35th Avenue South in Minneapolis. And this covenant reads in part, the party of the second part hereby agrees that the premises shall not at any time be conveyed, mortgaged, or leased to any person or persons of Chinese, Japanese, Moorish, Turkish, Negro, Mongolian, or African blood or descent. And then it starts to say, said restrictions shall run with the land. So there's some terms in here that are very familiar to us, and there's some terms that are less familiar to us. And this is part of the history of racial covenants, is that these early covenants tend to have this laundry list of groups that are not allowed to be there. And like I said, some of these are familiar and some of these are less familiar. Like, why is this covenant talking about Mongolian people? Why is this covenant talking about Moorish and Turkish people? And I think like I dwell on this a little bit because it is often it is somewhat difficult sometimes to nail down exactly what our modern conception of who is being targeted in these would be. So for Mongolian is a good example. So Mongolian almost certainly refers to Asian people generally. In 19th century and early 20th century, quote unquote, race science, there was this idea that people are descended from overall master groups, and one of those groups is the Mongolian group that they came up with. And so Asian people are certainly under that umbrella, but also potentially Native American people were considered to be a part of the Mongolian family of people. And so it's a little hard to tell sometimes precisely who these covenants are targeting. And it's also been suggested that some of these covenants may come from sort of like property developers that had English origins. And so you may see some British colonial preoccupations in this early language rather than who is necessarily in the communities where these are being targeted. This is another one from more rural Minnesota, central Minnesota. Said premises shall not be sold, leased, or rented or occupied by any person of the Negro, Oriental, Semitic, or Indian races, or who has the blood of any said races, except as limited by present laws or treaties. And so here we have, again, Black people explicitly targeted. And it's important to note that while other groups come and go, like 99.999% of the racial covenants in the United States target Black people. That is the overarching preoccupation of people in racial covenants. But here you also see, again, Asian people being targeted, Jewish people specifically being targeted. And in Minnesota, it's about 1% to 2% of the covenants that specifically mention Jewish people. And then here you have Native American people explicitly targeted, which is somewhat unusual. And you also have this language about treaties, which is very interesting in a dark way. But the inclusion of Native Americans here and the mention of treaty rights is also a prompt to think about the ways in which the history of racial covenants and other parts of just another technologies of segregation is that whole land system that we use is built upon the theft of that land in the first place from Native people. And so it's part of that longer story of like the land first being taken from Native people and then being divvied up in a inequitable way. And the lesson of that history of covenants and these waves of displacement and discrimination is just that like the racialization of space has been a long-term project in American land, basically. Here's another one. That no lot shall be sold, conveyed, leased, or rented to any person other than of the white or Caucasian Aryan branch race. And I always show this one. This one is from Richfield, Minnesota. And this one is from 1946. This covenant was put into place the year after we fought World War II to theoretically get rid of language like this Aryan language here. But yet someone in Minnesota felt comfortable putting this in a property record the year after the end of World War II. And this is a map showing most of the extent of what we mapped so far in the Twin Cities. We have mapped 35,000 racially covenanted properties in Minnesota, 78,000 covenants nationwide. And what we're developing is this picture of the ways in which racial covenants really reserve vast swaths of land for the exclusive use of white people. And this is an animation of some of that same data. And what you can see is starting in about 1910 and really picking up in the 20s, this spreading out of covenants across big areas. And I know this class does not know the geography of the Twin Cities that well, but what you see here is really the surrounding of the outer borders of Minneapolis and St. Paul with these covenants. And this is really where development was happening at the time. And you see a drop off during the Great Depression, then picking up in the 40s again. You see them kind of moving out to these more lake regions. Um, and what we see in the Twin Cities and is this sort of like 1920s first peak, a drop off during the Depression, as you have the housing shortage and end of World War II and the GI Bill, covenants come roaring back in the mid 40s. And then as legislation starts coming in the 50s, they tail off, but they do have somewhat of a long tail. In Minnesota, there's a law that bans new covenants from going in 1952. We do still see covenants after that date, many fewer. There's a federal Supreme Court ruling in 1948 that makes covenants unenforceable, but there's a lot of covenants that go in after 1948. There are whole counties in Minnesota where almost all of the covenants go in after 1948. So just because these things become illegal does not necessarily mean they go away immediately. But even if we say, okay, like these become completely illegal with the passage of the 1968 Fair Housing Act. I'm not sure I got my year right there. Yeah, 68 Fair Housing Act. Um, that was well over 50 years ago now, right? So some people would say that's a long time ago. We hear this sometimes, although I know that there are people on this call who don't necessarily think that 1968 was that long ago. Certainly within living memory of a lot of people. But why do we still care today? And the reason that we still care today is that in many places like the Twin Cities, we still have this huge divide in access to things like home ownership. And the Twin Cities actually has the largest gap in the country between white home ownership and black home ownership. Today, 76% of white families in the Twin Cities own their home, while only 28% of black families own their home. And nationally, the black home ownership rate is really not much better than it was in 1968, despite decades and decades of housing discrimination allegedly being illegal. And so these problems that racial covenants and other technologies of segregation like redlining create are still very much with us. Another example of this shows the power of the data we produce because we produce very granular data that is down to the parcel level, is that economists have found that in Minneapolis, a covenanted home in 2019 was still worth 15% more than a non-covenanted home in Minneapolis. And so that means there is a price difference, there's a price premium on houses in racially covenanted neighborhoods today. Whereas houses in redlined neighborhoods still have 25% less than the median home value. And so these are not historic disparities. These are conditions that get created by these technologies as segregations that are still with us. And so what does this mean in practice? So my parents' house in Wisconsin has a racial covenant on it. And that means that someday, either when they sell the house or when I inherit the house and sell the house, we will make extra money off the fact that there was a covenant in that house. This research suggests. And that's not because anyone wants to live in a covenanted neighborhood now. It's because now that we have these like decades and decades of investment in some neighborhoods and divestment from other neighborhoods that makes these places that have been traditionally advantaged something that has monetary consequences and benefits for people still to this day. So this is still with us today. We're also doing this work in other cities around the country as our other projects. This is a project we just finished with our partners in Milwaukee. There's a lot of racial covenants in Milwaukee. We also are working with partners in Washington, D.C. Again, like tens of thousands of covenants in D.C., tens of thousands of covenants in Milwaukee. And we're almost done with the metro area in Minnesota. We are now moving to smaller cities and rural areas where we are finding covenants, and the patterns are different in an interesting way. We're also working in Contra Costa County in California, Forsyth County in North Carolina, and we're in discussion. I was trying to find out, okay, well, what do we got in the East Coast? But we have a lot of discussions and nothing formal yet, although we have done some work with North and East Essex County in Massachusetts, although I don't have a map for them right now. But there's a number of researchers around the country doing this, and we are in consortium with many of them in the National Covenants Research Coalition. And other than just educating people about the history of racial covenants and racial segregation, part of the goal of our project is really to think about the ways in which how we make maps really matters. And what I mean by that is like the way that we do our work is that we get images of historic property records from a county. We OCR those records. We then flag got documents that we think have racial terms in them. And then we show those documents that we think have racial covenants to them to volunteers using a crowdsourcing platform called Zooniverse. And we actually show each of those suspected records to 5 volunteers separately. They answer a series of questions about them. Yes or no, is there a covenant? Where in space is it located using a physical description? And transcribing the text of the covenant, the buyer and the seller. And then we're able to compare all those answers to each other, which is how we're able to go through tens of thousands of documents without having like expert checking on everything. By comparing everyone's answers to each other, we're able to get a solid, accurate consensus answer about the documents. And then we use the information they've collected to put those on a map. And this is a process that really developed initially just out of necessity to get through the scale of records that we were dealing with. But crowdsourcing is a really interesting and robust way of doing work that one is more accurate than traditional expert transcription. But two, our volunteers really taught us that there's a huge amount of power in coming together to learn about these things together, to see primary documents that are in your community, to recognize names of streets or names of people that you might recognize, and really understand concretely that this is not an abstract thing that happens somewhere else. This is a thing that is very close to home. And what our volunteers have really taught us, and we call our volunteers community map makers because we truly can't make the map without them. What our community map makers have taught us is that it's the power of having those conversations together, discovering the reality of structural racism in a different way, in a concrete way, in a non-threatening environment. That's really what powers them to take action elsewhere and start showing up at their zoning meeting or their city council meeting and speaking up and saying, hey, the way we did things in the past was not equitable. How do we do better in the future? And our community map makers really feel like they own our work because they do. They're correct. And that's an amazing power to have because we have people all the time. One of our great one of our funny experiences we have regularly is people will come up to us at parties and say, I don't know if you've heard about this project Mapping Prejudice. And we say, well, I work for them. And then they explain your project back to you. But it's clearly getting out there, and that's amazing. And we've distilled our understanding about this into this sort of mantra we have, which is that the process is the product, is that like the work that is the real work of the project is those interactions that people are having in the transcription sessions and the conversations they're having with each other. So the real goal and the secret to Mapping Prejudice's success is the experience of encountering primary sources and absorbing that new information. And so even if we could automate away some of these processes, which is much harder than people think, AI is not about to start doing this despite some people's claims. Even if we could do that, that would be antithetical to our goals. We want people to be encountering these things and mapping things together. Another way in which how we map matters is like this is these are parcels that existed in space. There's no houses on these parcels. Oops, why did that not work? Okay, I'm going to skip this visual because for some reason that's not working. But I think it's also really important as we're doing this work to think about how are these maps going to be received by the community. Oh, okay, now it's going to work. Okay. So these are parcels that have been laid out in, I think, Richfield that don't even have houses on them yet. But before they even had houses, they had racial covenants on these parcels. And there are some people who are doing this map, who are mapping racial covenants, who just say, well, there's a lot of covenants in this subdivision. So I'm just going to mark this whole square as green, meaning it has a covenant. And this is something that we're careful to push back on because you have to think about the ways that people are going to use this map. So if you color in every lot in this subdivision and say there's a covenant on that parcel, what people are going to want to do is they want to go down and they want to do what's called discharge to get rid of the covenant. Well, it doesn't really get rid of it, to disavow the covenant on their property. And if people are going down to the county and saying, I want to fill out this form because there's a covenant on my property, and the county tells them, no, you're wrong, there's not a covenant on your property, that undermines confidence in your work very, very quickly. And so even though I would argue that like conceptually, yes, this whole subdivision is racially restricted because there's knowledge in this subdivision that people are not welcome there. We would only color in these red boxes because it's really important that when people go back and check your work and verify your work, people are already so primed to disbelieve anything about racism that like if you don't have your stuff double checked, triple checked, people are going to come at you and judge your work, and you got to be careful about that. And I think we also want to think about, as we're mapping things, what work should this map do in the world, and what does that mean for how we map? And I know I'm coming up on my time, but I just want to say, and today I think like we're seeing a lot of examples in the Twin Cities and around the country why that different ways in which that's critically important. So this is a map from yesterday showing ice activity in the Twin Cities. And this is a map that is completely powered by anonymous community volunteers. But I think it's a great thing to look at to understand the work that that maps can do in the world, particularly with community contributions. These are maps that are being used very actively to keep people safe on a day-to-day basis. That is only possible because of lots of people working together um, without really any authority behind it whatsoever. And I think like this is just a great example of the power of community-generated maps, both to illustrate what's going on in a situation and to actively help people in their lives. I would be remiss if I didn't say today that like we're this is a really bad situation in the Twin Cities, and I hope people understand that, and I hope you are reading the news about what's going on, because things are pretty crazy. But I will stop there, and we can do questions. And we'd love to, we're doing active transcription now, so we'd love to see you at an upcoming transcription session if you want to learn more. So thank you.
Questions, Dalton.
Thanks, Michael. I was just gonna ask, you said that crowdsourcing was more accurate than traditional mapping. I just wasn't sure why. Did I ask that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It seems counterintuitive, but like generally, if you have like traditional transcription, you'll have someone who is theoretically trained to do the typing or and like read things, and then maybe like hopefully you also have someone checking behind them, because like we have in my opinion we have the greatest property researcher in the country working on our project, Penny Peterson. She gets paid $0. She's been doing this forever. But Penny would be the first to say that even she makes mistakes sometimes. And if she's the only one who looks at that, that mistake is not necessarily going to get caught. So the way that crowdsourcing works is you have like a number of people and all of the answers answering the same questions. Not they don't necessarily have to answer the same questions, but that's how we're doing it currently. And you can compare all of their answers to each other. And so, like for example, if you have a given task, say like, does this document have a racial covenant on it? And if you have like two people say no and three people say yes, there have been studies done that say like you can rely on the fact that three people said yes. And generally what we see is we see actually quite a high level of agreement where usually all of the people are agreeing. And so just by like having multiple people look at the same things, you have error checking that is built in that is just not possible at the scale that we're talking at of like tens of thousands of records that people are looking at. Like I have a slide in some of my presentations that shows, I think it's something like hundreds of thousands of hours like of like graduate student labor that no one really has that will be required for this. And I think the same issue is very present in like AI workflows right now, where like there are some of these tasks where AI could do, and AI is a very general term, where like machine learning could probably do a statistically pretty good job at some of these tasks. But you still have the same problem of, well, how do you know it is right in this instance? Like just because it's statistically right 80% of the time, is this individual observation correct? And again, the problem is that like when you're talking, I mean, really when you're talking about anything, but like particularly when you're talking about racism, a 20% error rate is way, way, way too high. Like people are gonna question all of your results if you're something like that. And so like when you're hearing all these things about people being able to automate everything, you have this question about like, well, but how are you going to check your work and verify it? And it's one of the great things about crowdsourcing is that like that is built into the process. You don't have to worry about that because it is already accounted for in the process.
Thank you.
Michael.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm also Michael. How do you discover new racial covenants? Are you looking at library archives? Like, what's the process by which you go out and find more?
So there's two. So generally, the baseline of our methodology is we will go to whoever is the records custodian of the property records. In the United States, that's usually the county, but particularly on the East Coast, like that can get weird. Like in Essex County, there's a separate property office for the north half of the county, and there's a separate property office for the south. But we're going to whoever maintains the property records, and we're getting like a hard drive of images of their records. Most places do not have their historic records OCR'd, so you can just search on it. Like that is starting to happen a little bit, but most places still don't have that on their historic records. And so we have to get this, like we have to negotiate with the record holder to get a bulk dump of their records, and then we run that through our software process. And honestly, that is another part that researchers have learned is that like just getting the records is often the hardest part. Like in Milwaukee, it took us 3 years to get the records, even though these are public records. And so like people do sometimes bring us just like covenants that they found on their property, and that helps give us leads about where we might look. But we really want to look at scale and look at the whole county.
Other questions? Santiago.
Thanks for your presentation. It was brilliant. I'm wondering, you said it was really like the racial covenants really widespread. The first thing I noticed is like they're weirdly selective also. Like these are just the places where they kind of screen for possible social mobility. Uh, like because these places are more plastic, more flexible, we need to say it. Like no black people allowed. Do you agree with
Yeah,
that?
I think I generally agree with that. I think like there are sort of a few different things that predict where you're going to find racial covenants. One is just like where is development happening at the time that racial covenants are popular, because you don't tend to see them like so in the Twin Cities they start about 1910. Anywhere that was already developed by 1910, it is usually not the case that people go back and put in covenants retroactively. There's some different, but the second factor is particularly in places that are destinations of the first Great Migration, when Black people are starting to move to industrialized cities, like St. Louis or Chicago, you do see people putting in these reactive covenants around these areas where Black people are moving in. But that is often not the case. And in Minnesota, there really is no correspondence between where the covenants are and where Black people are living, because Black people are living kind of everywhere until they are restricted by covenants and violence. But like, and then as you say, it is almost always in what we would consider like attainable middle class housing, because if the houses are really big, um, generally the assumption is that not white people are not going to be able to access those houses because of the economic restrictions that are also part of the racism that they're encountering. Although we do see them sometimes, but generally, you're like the sweet spot for covenants is these like middle class bungalows. And I think it's also because in some cases these developers are developing land that is maybe not the best land. The houses are not the nice houses, and they see putting covenants in as an extra amenity to put lipstick on a pig in a little bit. Like, and also these are people who are the target audience for these houses who may feel like their own class position is a little um, up for debate or like fragile. And I would just argue as someone who studies movements like the KKK, I think that's also who you see being the KKK is people who feel like their own class positionality is maybe threatened, that they have to make sure that they're not having these influences that might further call into question their racial or class positionality.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Tekla.
Hey, Tekla. I just wanted to ask, do you know which cities have the lowest racial gap in house ownership? And is that because they don't have racial covenants? They do not have racial covenants?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think the short answer is I don't. Like that is certainly something you can look up. I think like my experience in doing this in journalism for a long time is that like it is actually pretty difficult to find places that have a low gap between black and white home ownership. My recollection is correct. There are some places in like Maryland, suburban DC, like that have a relatively low home ownership gap, but there's almost always a gap. And the problem with assessing that with racial covenants is that racial covenants research has actually been done still in like relatively few places, and certainly comprehensively. There's only a handful of communities that have systematically like mapped all of their racial covenants. And so I think that's a really difficult question to answer. I think like basically anywhere anyone has looked, they have found racial covenants, and while covenants if there was development going on at the time, like there's newer suburbs that didn't have racial covenants because no one was putting houses there, and so like there weren't racial covenants that were put there at the time. And particularly on the East Coast, there are these like 19th century covenants that in some cases go back even to the 1840s. They're definitely not as widespread. um, but I just think like there's so much that's still not yet known about the true extent of where racial covenants are. And I also think that, like I said, racial covenants are never the only game in town. And so it's not as simple as just saying if we know where the covenants are or aren't, we know where the racism is and isn't, because it overlaps with a lot of just overt violence. And often covenants are seen as the sort of like alternative to having to violently push your neighbors out. You put in covenants and you don't have to go to all the trouble of attacking your neighbors. But there's also things like redlining, which comes later. There's things like freeways, there's things like restrictive zoning. And so, depending on the history of a community, you have different phases of all of these different things that go together. And so, it's really important. And I'm a historian, of course, I'm going to say this, that local context really matters, and understanding the individual history of individual communities is really key to understanding how did things come to be the way they are. Milwaukee is a great comparison with the Twin Cities. Like on paper, Milwaukee and the Twin Cities look really similar, but their history of covenants is actually pretty different. And that's really interesting. But I think like it has to do with when are places industrializing, what specific ethnic communities are there, and so it's and this is a fight we have to have with economists sometimes who just want to build a model, and if they can't make the p-value move in the model, they start questioning, well, if we can't quite make that simple model work, is the racism really there? And what we would always argue is like, well, we have ample testimony the racism is there, and so like we need to understand the ways in which it manifests itself. Mhm.
Your question?
I was just gonna ask, did he superimpose the ice map? Oh, hold on. I was gonna ask, did you superimpose the ice map on the covenant map?
This is a great question. And I was just thinking about this briefly yesterday. I mean, honestly, like right now we don't have very much brain capacity for anything other than like trying to keep people safe. But I did look at it a little bit, and I think the crucial difference is that if you see here, like yesterday, for example, there was a ton of ice activity. Like,
Can you share your screen with that
oh
site again?
yeah, let me.
And maybe tell us a little bit about how that even came into being. Is that a tool that's used that was just built for the Twin Cities, or is that
There's a national map here, and I don't know who built it. It's actually really, really nice. This is not easy to do like at scale, and like they did a really good job. And like anyone who knows me knows like I do not give out compliments on maps very easily, but this is a good map. Um, but I think like someone just saw that there's this need for rapid reporting, and this is really between this and signal chats, these are really where people are getting their live information right now about like where people are. So yesterday, for example, there was a ton of activity over here in Burnsville, Shakopee, Chaska. What's complicated about this is these like first ring suburbs uh, were are the center of where racial covenants were, but now they are the areas that are diversifying quickly, um, and the places where ICE is mostly like ICE is definitely like they are racially profiling. I don't think that's even I think that's a factual statement. They're going where they think there's a lot of non-white people. Like and so like that is in some of the first ring suburbs where traditionally there were covenants. The problem with this map is like this is where they were yesterday. If you would have looked at Sunday, there was a ton of activity where I am in St. Paul and Minneapolis, and so like they move around. So I'm sure people are gonna study like what is the overlap between here, but I think this is a great example of how like the chronology and history of the community really matters. Is that like since covenants were illegal, things do change about the patterns, um, and it is really interesting to be because I we do a lot of presenting in these first ring suburbs, and I certainly had a stereotype about what to expect in a first ring suburb, based that on because like many of them were founded as like sites of racial exclusion. And like it is really interesting that at least in the Twin Cities, a lot of these first ring suburbs are now like majority not white. The government is majority not white, and they're really interested in the ways in which they can like undo some of the damage here. And they are some of our biggest cheerleaders, honestly. And I've had to like unlearn some of my suburban biases. So, but and I think like development after 1968, like that's where you're mostly not seeing ICE raids. Like they mostly don't get out there. The other reason you're seeing raids in these first ring suburbs is because the resistance is so fierce in Minneapolis and St. Paul that they've had to move out a little bit more, where people have been less organized but are rapidly getting organized.
Other questions in the room? I might open it up. PJ, if you have any questions or comments, you're good?
I'm good. That's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, I have a couple questions. Was there any public objection to the racial covenants when they were being created in that time period?
Well, I would like among people being targeted by the covenants, like yes, very much so. Like in the 1940s, this was the number one target of activism by the NAACP was racial covenants.
Huh.
And when the Supreme, and I think sometimes the way we think about these historic things like the Civil Rights Acts of the 60s and the Fair Housing Act in 1968, or the Supreme Court ruling in 1948, they're seen as these milestones where the country recognized an injustice. And I think like the story is actually, I think, a little flipped on its head when we understand that the 1948 Shelley v. Kramer case, where they ruled covenants unenforceable, was actually the third try. The NAACP brought three separate cases, and the Supreme Court kept ruling against them. And it's only on the third try that the Supreme Court actually
Over what
reversed
period of
itself.
time?
I think going back to 1927, maybe the first one, but they had several shots at it. Like, and so like it's really only the determined activism of groups like the NAACP that eventually does get the turn the tide, like in getting these things reversed. So there is a lot of pushback, particularly from African Americans, and by Asian people. There's another Supreme Court case. Actually, I'm not sure if it's a Supreme Court case, but there's another court case where I believe someone in either Washington or Oregon who is Asian challenges the covenants and said, these covenants don't apply to me. You can't prove that I'm not white because being white is a made up concept. Prove to me that I'm not white. And the court essentially says, yeah, you're kind of right. Like, we actually can't define what makes someone white, but we know it's not you. And they rule against him. And so like there is a lot of resistance, like from not white people to this. I don't want to say there's no resistance from white people, but it is a lot less. People are much more likely to go along with it. But I think but I think it is important to note that there are always people saying this is wrong, this is un-American, this is a violation of the 14th Amendment, like all of those things.
This is kind of in the weeds, but are in a particular geographic area, let's say Golden Valley,
Mm-hmm.
are you confident that every title has been analyzed, or are there some titles that don't get analyzed for one reason or another?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have certainly made an effort to look at every single document. But I think like there are, but I don't think I would say we are 100% certain we have found every covenant, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is that we are relying. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, that wasn't my question.
Oh,
My
sorry.
question was whether every title has been considered, not whether every covenant has been found.
Every title has been considered. Can you say more? I guess I'm not quite sure I
Well, I
understand.
mean, if there's 1,000 pieces of property in a geographic area,
Mhm.
Do you have those 1,000 records so that you can then say there's covenants in 100, and then there's and then maybe they've said there are no covenants in 800, but then there's another 100 that we don't know, or maybe you didn't get that extra
Yeah.
100.
Yeah, it's kind of a nuanced answer. For the most part, like we think we've gotten everything, and I think that's the big advantage of us. And by when I say we got everything, like we have been given all of the records that the
Yeah,
county has.
they have.
Yeah. Now there's an asterisk there too, because often when the county gives us records, we will do some analysis and say, hey, we think there's a gap here, and so we do often have to go back to counties, and so we are certainly making an effort to look at everything, and to the extent possible, we are looking at everything. But like we do know of cases where we didn't get everything, and it's not the county trying to intentionally withhold stuff. It's just that
Yeah.
like they just don't access these records that often. Like, and so like people don't generally ask for them. Um, but this was part of the process with Milwaukee is it took several tries for them to like give us everything.
Yeah.
And in fact, we found most of the covenants in their unindexed files that they originally didn't give us. Um, but the other problem is that like you are relying on the OCR, and OCR is fallible because either the type, like maybe the type is smudged, maybe the original image is bad. And so like in somewhere like I'm gonna go back to like let's look at where's my Twin Cities? So like if you look here in like the St. Louis Park area where you've got the sort of like patchwork of green, those gaps are probably like they probably are covenants on those properties in the middle.
Interesting.
But like
You
either
couldn't prove it.
yeah, and what probably happened there is just the OCR wasn't good enough. Like and like and so it didn't get flagged, and so no one looked at it. Like
We need to wrap up, but I'm going to
yeah.
ask one more question. I think it's a quick one. How many contributors do you have nationwide? Like, how many people have contributed, been a participant in this process?
It's over 13,000. So a lot of people.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael.
Yep. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Take care.
Great job, and good luck with everything you got going
Yeah,
on.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very interesting. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He was good.
He was really good.